Every day, children from all different backgrounds and life circumstances go to school. What would a classroom where all students feel welcome, accepted, and supported look like? Where students' individual circumstances and needs are acknowledged and used as the building blocks for responsive, student-centered pedagogy. Today, we will be exploring this question and will be critically examining some of the practices and policies which punish students in poverty and how we can abolish them to be more equitable for all. Your speakers for this presentation are Kylie Savage, Jillian Stutt, and Ashley Van Wright.
Today we will be discussing the following practices and policies that punish students living in poverty. The policies we will be focusing on in this presentation are school uniforms, celebrating Christmas and holidays in school, and field trips. We will then explore solutions to these challenges and effective classroom strategies to address these inequitable practices and policies. Let's begin.
First, we'll discuss school uniforms. Do you think school uniforms hurt or help students in poverty? Feel free to pause this video and reflect on the question yourself before moving on. The proponents of a school uniform argue that mandating a uniform for all students will eliminate the pressure of low-income families to spend large amounts of money on brand-name clothing items, an attempt to lessen a socioeconomic divide between students. But is this really effective? A middle-class family may find that purchasing all of the necessary parts of a uniform might be cheaper than purchasing brand-name clothing. But for lower-income families who rely on hand-me-downs or secondhand stores, this is not the case. Not to mention, school uniforms tend to be pretty pricey. Here we've included a list of prices to the right for all of the different pieces of one local high school's uniform. Although not all pieces are required to be bought, a variety of at least one top and bottom for warm and cold weather would be considered the bare minimum to ensure a student is able to dress comfortably at all times of the year. So let's assume a student has the bare minimum and they've purchased the cheapest option for each article. For just these 4 items, the family's already spending approximately $160 after taxes. And the situation only worsens when we consider what a family is forced to spend when they have more than one child in their family. In this bare minimum scenario, where a student owns these 4 pieces of the uniform, the student would likely be wearing the same clothing items day after day, since a family who cannot afford additional clothing items likely cannot afford to wash their clothes after every school day either, leading to students becoming self-conscious about their hygiene. This then leads to students missing school to avoid these types of situations, which leads to an entire new set of school-related issues in both social and academic contexts. Another issue we see with the concept of enforcing a school uniform is dress-down days. A dress-down day, for those who aren't familiar, is a day that is typically earned by paying or raising money, and the reward is that you get to dress out of uniform for a day or sometimes even a week. I personally feel that gifting students with dress-down days as a response to monetary funds defeats the entire purpose of enforcing a uniform if the reason you are enforcing it is to minimize judgment among students who can't dress in expensive taste. Which leads me to question, what is the true motive behind mandating a school uniform?
Next, we will critically examine common practices that take place in Catholic school classrooms around Christmas time that may seem harmless, yet can be damaging to a child living in poverty. Christmas is a joyous time of year for many Catholics around the world, but for many people, the expectations that come with Christmas can be stressful and even devastating. As both students and teachers, some of our group members can recall celebratory practices involving gift exchanges, Christmas dinners, and fundraisers which often rely on donations by the students' families. These practices don't take into full consideration the impact on families living in poverty. Of course, we are not implying that fundraising and activities such as these are bad or that we should not partake in them at all. It's more about the expectations. Growing up, I can remember teachers keeping a checklist and reading out the names of students who had not yet brought in their donations. Phrases like "as little as $1" would be used regularly. These expectations should be made unacceptable. A family should have a choice of whether or not to donate, because not all families can afford to donate $1. Many schools also take part in Spirit Days or Spirit Weeks leading up to Christmas. However, not all students have clothing that fits into the theme of the day, and they are not able to go and purchase clothing specifically for that day. especially since clothing like an ugly Christmas sweater is only deemed appropriate a few days out of the year. Asking students what they got for Christmas may not seem harmful, but for students whose families cannot afford gifts, this can cause anxiety listening to all the things their classmates got and having to say they received no Christmas gifts or lie to protect their self-esteem. Whether or not children are aware of the situation in their family is in financially, it can take a toll on a child to compare what they received and how they celebrated compared to their classmates. The last point we have to make regards Santa. While it can be difficult at times to understand why someone's mom or dad bought a classmate nicer gifts than they received from their own, it is even more devastating and confusing for a student to understand why Santa, who is said to deliver gifts to good girls and boys, delivered their dream gift to a classmate, yet likely bought them something very small or possibly nothing at all. Allowing students to believe Santa doesn't love them or that they were not a good kid could be shocking and devastating to a child.
Finally, we will discuss field trips, the ways in which they are of questionable equity in schools, and how we can use field trips as accessible and equitable opportunities for all students to enhance and support their learning. Field trips are an excellent way for elementary and secondary students to expand their knowledge and learn about topics from first-hand, hands-on experiences. The purpose of field trips is to enrich, enhance, and build on curriculum learned in the classroom. Most times, field trips are intended for all students to attend and participate in, but students are not given the resources or equitable opportunities to do so. Unfortunately, due to poverty or low socioeconomic status, many students and their families are unable to come up with the funds necessary to attend field trips. This causes students to not only miss out on valuable learning opportunities, but they can also experience anxiety or embarrassment towards their family's socioeconomic status and possible financial problems. Oftentimes, this leads students to self-exclude in order to protect their self-esteem. An example of self-exclusion is an individual telling their peers that they cannot attend the class skating trip because their parents think it's too dangerous and not because they cannot afford it. As educators, it is our responsibility to ensure that our students are provided not only with equal opportunities, but with equitable opportunities, making certain that all students have the support and resources needed. This can be done through advocating and fundraising, among other things, which we will discuss later on in our presentation. Take a moment to reflect on the following. Would it be more beneficial, meaning equitable and accessible, for all students for there to be a smaller number of field trips throughout the school year due to school costs or budgets that every student can attend, or that there are a greater number of field trips that the students and their families are responsible and required to pay for? While there would not be as many field trips for the first option, the experiences that they do have will include all students of the class, and therefore will no doubt be more meaningful to each and every student in the classroom. In this case, it really should be about quality over quantity, and again ensuring that all students, no matter their socioeconomic status or any other barrier that may be limiting their ability to attend the field trip, are able to participate in and benefit from these educational experiences.
Now that we have discussed some policies that can be harmful to students living in poverty, we will now suggest some ways to make these policies more equitable.
If school boards want to mandate a uniform policy, they should strive to make uniforms accessible for all students, including those who cannot afford them. If proper funding that covers the cost of uniforms for all students is not possible, school-run fundraisers is one option to raise money for this. Some ideas of fundraisers include bake sales, car washes, book fairs, clothing drives, and more. Another idea for uniform policy adjustments is that schools could be more lenient with uniform requirements. For example, wearing a red shirt and blue pants instead of mandating official uniforms can be more cost-effective for students and allows parents to shop on their own budget. Schools could also run used uniform sales, where families could donate old uniforms that their children no longer wear and sell them at a discounted price.
While on placement, my associate teacher did an event called Secret Friend during the Christmas season. Similarly to Secret Santa, students would pick names at the beginning of December, and whoever they picked would be their secret friend. Their job was to be nice to the student that they picked. This would include things like writing them notes, playing with them at recess, putting their chair up at the end of the day, helping them, etc. My associate expressed that they did not need to buy anything for their secret friend because the goal was to perform acts of kindness towards them. The last day before Christmas, students would have a chance to guess who their secret friend was, so my associate encouraged students to be nice to everyone in the class so that their secret friend would have a challenge figuring out it was them. Replacing events like Secret Santa with ones like this promotes giving kindness to others rather than purchasing something to give. This makes participating in an event more enjoyable for students who may not have the funds to purchase gifts. It is also important to recognize that not all students look forward to Christmas and the break that follows it. For some students, school is their safe place, and being at home for 2 weeks can cause stress and anxiety. By refraining from asking questions like, "What did you get for Christmas?" or "What fun things did you do on the break?" we make returning to school easier for students who may have experienced hardships over the break. An alternative question could be, "Did you have a favorite moment over the break?" This could be anywhere from sleeping in to going ice skating, which may make students feel more comfortable sharing. Or we could simply say, "I'm so glad to see everyone again," and move on with our lessons. There are many Christmas crafts and activities that teachers can facilitate, which students can give to their family and friends without having the stress of purchasing gifts for others. One example I can remember from elementary school was making an ornament with a string inside that was the same height that I was at the time. I remember giving it to my parents, and they found it very meaningful and special. They still have it to this day. Although I was fortunate enough not to worry about purchasing gifts, some students feel immense pressure when trying to find a way to give people gifts. By giving students an opportunity to create meaningful gifts, students are able to express themselves creatively and learn that you do not need money to give someone a gift that they will love and cherish. It is also important to acknowledge that not all students in your classroom will celebrate Christmas. Even when teaching in a Catholic school, some students may not celebrate Christmas because they cannot afford to, or they may celebrate something else. So it is important to talk about other celebrations around that time of year, such as Kwanzaa or Hanukkah, so that students feel seen and heard.
Field trips are a great chance to give students real-life experiences, and they should be made accessible for all students. To make field trips more equitable for students, teachers could ask their school board for additional funding. Schools or classrooms can engage in classroom initiatives or fundraising projects such as bake sales or selling chocolate bars. Raising money for the entire class helps students living in poverty to not feel singled out. This also puts emphasis on classroom collaboration as they work together toward a shared goal. Another way to make field trips more accessible would be to find virtual field trips, such as a virtual tour of the Parliament building in Ottawa, which is linked on this slide. Virtual field trips still give students learning experiences without causing anxiety for students who have financial trouble, and ensure that all students are able to participate and benefit from these learning opportunities. Some field trips only require a bus transportation fee, which could be avoided by asking for parent volunteers to help with transportation.
We felt that this topic was important to discuss due to the unfortunate fact that we will all have students living in poverty in our classrooms, whether we know it or not. And it's important that we understand that some practices and policies that are in place in our schools do not take into consideration students in poverty, even practices that have been around for a very long time. While on placement, we have all witnessed the effects that poverty has on students and how the issue of poverty is not addressed enough or overlooked when it comes to various school policies and practices. Additionally, we found that this topic is inextricably linked to the lecture, Reaching Students in Poverty. Listening to this lecture, as well as engaging in discussion posts, we felt strongly about the inequities present in the policies and procedures in schools that often are not seen as harmful. Like Amina Abdul mentioned in her presentation, it is important for educators to overcome their personal biases that have been created from the environment that they have been a part of. By doing so, we are able to create an environment with the highest potential for equitable opportunities among students, and a space where students feel seen, loved, appreciated, and able to learn to their full potential.